Hello and welcome to Education at SSBJ online video tutorials. In the previous video tutorial, we have learned few physical properties of metals. We are dealing with a chapter Metals and Non-Metals of Class 8 CBSE. Among the properties of metals, there are physical properties as well as chemical properties. And in the physical property, we have studied about metals are particularly available in the state of solids, right? So, as far as state is concerned, we have three states of matter. They are solid, liquid, and gases. And metals are generally solids. And why do I say metals are generally solids at room temperature? Because there are some metals which are not solids at room temperature. Right? For example, at high temperature metals, we all know metals melt. But at room temperature, for example, silver or any other metal, you say they are in the form of solids. But there is one metal which we all have seen because it is used in thermometer. It's called mercury. And if you take out the mercury and allow it on the surface, it starts flowing. Right? I hope you have seen this mercury which is in the bulb of the thermometer. Mercury is a liquid, right? But it's a liquid metal. So it's an exception. That is why we have to say metals are generally solids. But again, at room temperature. There is one metal, gallium. Gallium is again a solid itself at room temperature, but the moment you hold it in the hand, it becomes liquid because our body has got some temperature. Now we have studied about the luster. And what do you mean by luster then? Luster is a quality of shining, right? A metal shine. And why do metals shine? Because the light which falls on the metal reflects properly in such a way. You must have studied two types of reflections, diffused reflection as well as, even reflection. And what happens in the case of metals, most of the reflected rays, particularly in the gold and silver, right, and even in the platinum, they reflect properly, and more of the reflected light rays will reach our eyes and we get a feeling of shining. So metals have quality of reflection of light. Example, gold, silver, even the copper, polished copper will reflect. The platinum also will reflect. So we can say that, metals are lustrous. Right? Metals are lustrous. But again, there is a problem here. There are some exceptions. For example, sodium. You must have heard sodium chloride. Right? In that sodium part. Sodium chloride is salt, common salt which we use. Right? Sodium, it looks, bit like this. And there is no luster. It is not as hard as any other metal. Sodium is a bit smooth. It doesn't have any luster. But it's a metal, right? So, sodium can be referred as an example for non-lustrous, metal, right? Next, what is learned so far is metals are generally solids at room temperature and metals are lustrous, right? The next property is malleability. And what do you mean by malleability? Malleability is you can beat on the metal, right, and convert them into sheets. All the metal sheets are just hammered, right? So you can convert them into sheets. And that property of metal is called, malleability. Next is ductility, right? And what do you mean by ductility? Ductility is a property of a metal, ability of a metal, which can be drawn into wires. So you take a metal and it can be drawn into wires. For example, 100 grams of silver can be drawn into 200 meters long. Right? So, can you tell me which is the most ductile metal known? Is it, silver or platinum or gold or copper? Right? Among these metals, you will find gold has slightly more ductility. Even gold and platinum are most ductile metals existing on earth. Gold has slightly more ductility than platinum. The next property will see conduction. And what do you mean by conduction? To conduct. Will it conduct electricity? Means will it allow electricity to pass through? Or will it conduct heat? Right? So as far as electricity is concerned, let us take a small cell, connect it with the wire. In fact, this experiment we will do in the next tutorial, and it's a very simple experiment. You all know that wire is a copper wire here, and copper is a metal, right? So connect them properly as it is shown on your screen. Connect to a switch. You can make your own switch also. If you have already a switch, you can connect it, and then connect that to a small, the part which is there on the screen is called resistor. And let me explain about that resistor in the next tutorials and its importance of using, because we are going to connect these two terminals to LED. And remember, LED has got one longer terminal, you can see that on the screen, as well as a smaller one, shorter one. And remember, as far as LED is concerned, the longer one is a positive one and the other one, which is shorter, is the negative. Right? And in the circuit, what you see now on the screen is a circuit, and in the circuit, remember that whenever you use LED, then you have to connect positive of the battery to the positive terminal of the LED, and the negative terminal of the battery will go to the negative terminal of the LED. Now what does this resistor do? Right? This resistor will resist the flow of current, because the more of current it goes to LED may fuse, spoil. So there is always a use of a resistance, right? Now, if you allow the current, and how will you allow the current? Switch it on, and then suddenly LED will on, right? It's a very simple experiment. You all must have somewhere or the here somewhere in the school only you must have done this. Okay. So when the electricity can pass through copper wire, copper is a metal, so we can conclude that metals are good conductors of electricity. I say good conductors of electricity. Right. Now as far as heat is concerned, how do metal allow the heat to pass through? If you keep a metal rod into the fire, and you will find after some time the heat moves from one end to another end, right, slowly, and even the other end also will become very hot, and that concludes metals are good conductors of heat. And so we have two more properties here. Metals are good conductors of heat and metals are good conductors of electricity, right? Now next physical property is melting and boiling point. Melting and boiling points, what do you mean by that? The temperature at which a metal melts or metal boils. This is a simple definition. This is not the actual definition, right? But for your class, you just remember that the temperature at which metal melts is a melting point, and metals have a high melting point and boiling point. It requires a lot of temperature. I'll show you a table. Now you can see here aluminum will melt at 659 degrees centigrade. The iron at the bottom you see 1482 degrees centigrade. Tungsten you can see here tungsten. Now this tungsten is used in the electric bulb, right? It will melt at 3399 degrees centigrade. Now at very high temperature it will melt, and therefore this tungsten is used in electric bulb. We have learned physical properties of metals. Please recall all the physical properties. But wait a minute, can we recall all the physical properties? Or imagine that you are now about to answer on your paper physical properties of metal. Will you be able to do that? Well, let us create a situation. A man and his dog, right? And the name of the dog is Sony. Now please start remembering all these characters of this situation. A man is calling his lucky dog Sony. Right? The entire situation can be written in single sentence. Man called his lucky dog Sony simply. Right? Let me repeat. Man called his lucky dog Sony simply. But wait a minute. Why did we just shift our topic to this sentence from metals and non-metals? Well, this is a sentence which will help us to remember the titles of the properties of metals, physical properties of metals. And this type of trick is called mnemonic. How do we pronounce it? Well, we'll refer Google.
Mnemonics. Mnemonics.
M silent. So it is mnemonic. We'll take up this sentence as it is. Man called his lucky dog Sony simply. Are you guessing something? Well, the first letter man, M, stands for malleability. And what is malleability? Ability of converting metal into sheet by hammering it. Metals are malleable. What about C, called? Conductivity. Metals are good conductors of heat and electricity. Then the next word is H. H is for hardness. Metals are hard. But there are some exceptions. Right? In every property there are some exceptions. Now we'll deal with those exceptions little later. This video is mainly for how to remember, which will help us to present it properly in the exam. Now L stands for luster, shining ability. D stands for ductility, ability to draw wires from the metal. And there are two S. One S can be taken for state. Is it a solid or a liquid? Right? And the second S is that property which will give a ringing sound. Metals, when you start hammering with another metal, it gives a ringing sound like a bell. Right? And that is what man called his lucky dog Sony simply. And once you get this sentence in your mind, now you can write it roughly somewhere, all these properties, and start working on presenting your answers. Very simple. So, can we do that? Physical properties of metals. First is conductivity. Metals are good conductors of electricity. But it doesn't mean that non-metals are bad conductors of electricity. Right? Some non-metals are also good conductors of electricity. That we'll see later. Ductility. Metals such as aluminium are ductile. Gold is very much ductile. Right? Ability to draw wires from metal. The next is hardness. Metals are all hard. Except few. Sodium is not hard. Potassium is not hard. They are soft. They can be cut with the help of knife. Luster, shining ability. Right? Metals are lustrous. Malleability. Just now I said ability to converting them into sheets by hammering it. Metals are malleable. Again, exceptions, sodium and potassium. And the state. Metals are solids at room temperature. You already learned that in the previous video tutorials at room temperatures, but there are exceptions such as mercury and gallium. Please refer the previous two tutorials. Now sonorous. By sonorous means it gives a ringing sound. Right? That's why it is called sonorous. All metals are sonorous in nature. Now once you come to know the properties of metal, it becomes very easy to write the properties of non-metals. Right? Some examples you can give for metals such as iron, copper, aluminium, calcium, magnesium, etc. Now let us compare the properties, same properties again with the non-metals. Right? We'll keep this beside, and now we'll bring non-metals. Metals are good conductors of electricity. Non-metals are poor conductors of electricity. But there is exceptions. You see that. Graphite is a good conductor of electricity. Graphite is a good conductor of electricity. Now we'll do experiment to prove that graphite is a good conductor of electricity in the next tutorials. In the same way, next is ductility. Metals are ductile, whereas non-metals will break down into powder. They cannot be drawn into wires. What about hardness? Metals are hard, right? And non-metals are soft, right? But diamonds are hard. And what do you mean by diamond? Diamond is again a carbon, and carbon is a non-metal. Luster. Metals are lustrous, they shine. And non-metals are generally, they don't shine. They lack luster. Right? What about malleability? Ability to converting them into sheets? Metals are malleable and non-metals are not malleable. They cannot be pounded into sheets. What about state? Metals are generally solids, except few. But most of the non-metals exist in 2 or 3 states of matter. They can be gas, they can be solids, they can be liquid also. Sonorous properties. Metals are
Sonorous means they give bell sound, whereas non-metals are non-sonorous. What are the examples? Sulfur, carbon, oxygen, phosphorus, and many. Okay, more than 90% of the entire elements are metals. Non-metals are very few, right? So this video is particularly to recall all this property and keep them one beside other and to memorize, because finally when you are in the examination hall, you have to reflect all that you have remembered. Hope that this mnemonics will help you and you can create your own mnemonics for as far as your studies are concerned. Thank you. See you again in the next tutorials. Thank you very much.